June 20th, 1944, USS Enterprise, Philippine Sea. Imperial Japanese Navy Lieutenant Junior Grade, Saburo Kitamura, stood in the enlisted mess hall, his hands trembling as he held a tray full of more food than his entire squadron had seen in 3 days. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes in butter, green beans, white bread, apple pie, and a cold glass of milk. The American sailor behind the counter, frustrated by the delay, waved his hand impatiently at the ice cream stand. "You want chocolate or vanilla?" The question was meaningless. Ice cream was not found on warships. Ice cream needed refrigeration that combat ships did not have. But here, on America's most seasoned carrier, enemy prisoners were being presented with an array of frozen treats. Kitamura had been rescued from the Philippine Sea 4 hours before. One of 43 Japanese airmen picked up during the Great Marianas Turkey shoot. He had expected to be executed, or at least tortured and starved. Japanese propaganda had been clear: Americans were barbarians who consumed their prisoners, devils who reveled in pain. Instead, his wounds were treated by medical corpsmen, he was dosed with morphine for pain, and ice cream flavors were presented to him. The chocolate or vanilla question would nag him for decades. The instant his perception of the war, of America, of all things started to fall apart. Throughout the Pacific War, some 35,000 Japanese military personnel would be subjected to American naval captivity and see abundance that destroyed everything they knew about the weakness of their enemy. They discovered carriers where enlisted sailors ate better than Japanese admirals, where machinery produced fresh water from seawater in unlimited quantities, where ice cream machines operated continuously, despite combat operations. These encounters with American naval logistics would demolish the spiritual foundations of Japanese military ideology more thoroughly than any defeat in battle. The mathematics of naval plenty were measured in calories and capability. While Japanese mariners lived on rice cakes and pickled greens, American sailors ate 4,100 calories every day of fresh, varied foods. While Japanese carriers pumped aviation fuel by hand, American carriers automated it all. While the Imperial Navy prayed to deities for divine breezes, the US Navy made its own weather with refrigeration, air conditioning, and ice cream on the high seas. The change started the instant Japanese survivors were hauled onto American ships. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the genius behind Pearl Harbor and a later Christian minister in America, reported on his 1945 rescue experience aboard the USS Missouri. "They hauled me up like a hooked fish, and I was ready to die. Instead, a medic helped patch up my wounds while a seaman served coffee. Real coffee, hot, with sugar and cream. I had not had coffee since 1942. The sailor apologized that they were short on donuts. This offhand reference to exhausted donut stockpiles while Japanese troops were munching on leather belts unveiled the gap between propaganda and fact. The Imperial Japanese Navy's own records captured after the war indicated that in 1944, enlisted sailors got about 1,400 calories a day when there were supplies. Protein came primarily from fish when boats could spare fuel for fishing. Vitamin deficiency was endemic. Beriberi, scurvy, and night blindness plagued crews. American naval rations, by contrast, included fresh meat daily, frozen vegetables, fresh baked bread, dairy products, eggs for breakfast, and multiple beverage options. The Office of Naval Records indicates that 1944 carrier mess halls fed about 15,000 meals every day on large carriers, with menus cycling through dozens of dishes. Tuesday could be roast beef. Thursday could be fried chicken. Sunday ham with pineapple. Japanese prisoners, used to stagnant rice rations, couldn't understand this variety at sea. The shock compounded when Japanese prisoners saw enlisted men's quarters. Petty Officer Kazuo Sakamaki, taken prisoner from a submarine at Pearl Harbor and America's first Japanese POW, went on to write of his astonishment at American submarine facilities. The enemy submarines had hot water showers. The crew slept in bunks with mattresses and fresh sheets. They possessed a library of books and magazines. The mess hall had a coffee urn that never ran dry. They enjoyed life more underwater than we enjoyed life on land. The availability of ice cream makers on American warships brought a specially crushing psychological blow. The Japanese Navy viewed ice cream as impossible aboard ships, a luxury that needed equipment none combat ship could afford. But by 1943, The US Navy had floating ice cream factories. The USS Lexington Ice Cream Factory produced 500 gallons. Concrete barges were rigged as ice cream ships with a yield of 5,000 gallons per shift. When USS Lexington CV-16 was torpedoed and listing, sailors able to escape on other vessels allegedly saved ice cream supplies before leaving their sinking ship behind. American damage control teams, spent from battling fires and flooding, were treated to Sundays as combat rations by American prisoners. The dissonance was staggering. Their country, struggling for survival, could not offer rudimentary sustenance to troops. The enemy, supposedly decadent and weakened, treated sailors to ice cream during battles. Captured when his destroyer was sunk at Leyte Gulf, Chief Petty Officer Yoshio Yamada spent 3 days on USS Iowa before being moved to shore facilities. His illegally imported diary, found years later, wrote, "The crew of the battleship eats in reliefs, but the food never ceases. They have machines to peel potatoes, cut bread, make ice. The kitchen is open 24 hours. They discarded more food after one meal than my entire ship received in a week's allowance. When I asked them why they waste, the guard grinned and replied, 'It's not waste if you have all you can get.'" The washing machines shocked Japanese POWs who were used to washing clothes in the ocean. Industrial washing machines, dryers, and pressing machines existed on American carriers. Clean uniforms were issued twice a week to enlisted sailors. Fresh water, valuable beyond calculation on Japanese ships, where sailors went weeks without washing, poured freely for showers, laundry, and cleaning. Evaporators on USS Enterprise had the capability of producing 140,000 gallons of fresh water a day. Combined, more than the entire Japanese carrier fleet could produce. Recreation centers on American carriers were impossible fantasy for Japanese military brains. Ships boasted movie theaters presenting Hollywood movies, libraries with a shelf of books counting thousands, gymnasiums with basketball courts, woodworking and craft hobby shops. The USS Enterprise had a newspaper printed every day at sea, featuring sports scores, comic strips, and home news. Japanese carriers boasted meditation rooms and shrine rooms. American carriers boasted soda fountains, offering milkshakes. Lieutenant Commander Tetsuo Mineta, captured after his Zero was shot down over Iwo Jima, spent 2 weeks aboard USS Bunker Hill. He went on to testify to American interrogators. "Your enlisted sailors live better than our officers. They have radios in their quarters, pictures of girlfriends, parcels from home with chocolate and cigarettes. They grumble about food that would be a feast for Japanese admirals." One sailor discarded a candy bar because it had melted a little bit. That candy bar contained more sugar than Japanese pilots saw in months. The hospitals revealed another chasm. Japanese naval medicine aimed at sending wounded back into action no matter what shape they were in. American sick bays gave the same high-tech treatment to enemies as American sailors. Carrier operating rooms boasted X-ray equipment, blood banks and surgical tools equal to those found ashore. Antibiotics, especially penicillin, were magic to Japanese medical staff, who saw infected wounds close in days rather than kill in weeks. Pharmacist Mate Second Class Robert Wagner, who was aboard USS Intrepid, later remembered treating Japanese prisoners. "They couldn't imagine we'd squander medicine on the enemy." One pilot whose leg wound was badly infected continued to try to refuse treatment, telling me, "Save it for Americans." I needed to take him to show him our medical supplies, sulfur-filled lockers, penicillin, morphine, to persuade him we had enough. He began crying. The repair facilities demonstrated American industrial supremacy at sea. Japanese ships limped back to homeland ports for any significant repair. American vessels fixed themselves while underway. Floating dry docks, repair ships, and carrier machine shops could manufacture replacement parts, rebuild engines, and fabricate entirely new equipment. US Enterprise's machine shop could produce any part smaller than an airplane engine. The welding shop operated continuously. The electrical shop rewired systems while the ship fought. When kamikaze raids became more frequent during 1945, surviving Japanese aviators saw American damage control excellence up close. Ensign Ryuji Nagatsuka, who was rescued after crashing his wounded Zero near USS Randolph, observed the carrier crew make kamikaze repairs while flying operations continued. They used foam that extinguished fires on contact, pumps that extracted water more quickly than it poured in, metal plates that plugged holes as we observed. Crews moved with choreographed efficiency. No yelling, no chaos. They repaired in a matter of hours what would have sent Japanese carriers to the bottom. American carrier food production systems boggled Japanese minds. Bakeries churned out 15,000 loaves of bread per day. Butcher shops sliced whole beef carcasses, kept in freezers as large as Japanese submarines. Ice makers churned out tons of ice per day for food storage and beverages. The USS Enterprise galley consumed more electricity than Japanese destroyers. Steam kettles were capable of heating 300 gallons of soup at once. Electric mixers, dishwashers, and potato peelers did jobs needing dozens of Japanese sailors. Resupply ships uncovered the last aspect of American abundance. Months passed before Japanese naval units were resupplied, frequently receiving only a fraction of needs. American fast carrier groups were supplied weekly while at sea. Fleet oilers offloaded millions of gallons of petroleum. Ammunition ships brought tons of ammunition. Store ships carried fresh supplies, mail, replacement crews, and luxuries. Lieutenant Minoru Tanaka observed underway replenishment from USS Hornet's brig. 3 ships alongside at once, fuel lines to port, ammo high lines to starboard, helicopters flying in the mail overhead. They moved more in 3 hours than Japanese carriers had in 3 months. The fresh provisions consisted of lettuce, tomatoes, and fruit, real fruit. We were fighting for the emperor on an empty stomach, while Americans were having salads on board. The mail system most impressed Japanese captives who may get 1 letter a year if lucky. Mail came every week to American sailors, even in war zones. V-mail, photographically compressed letters, came by the thousands. Packages from home brought cookies, candy, books, records, and photographs. The mail call, impossible for Japanese forces that were operating beyond home waters, sustained American morale through contact with home. Christmas 1944 had the most lasting psychological effect. Japanese captives on board American ships saw festive holidays surpassing pre-war Japanese New Year celebrations. USS Enterprise, December 25, 1944, menu recorded: roast turkey with stuffing, ham with pineapple glaze, mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, 3 vegetables, fresh rolls, 3 pie types, ice cream, candy, nuts, and coffee. Seaman First Class Hiroshi Nakamura, who was imprisoned on USS Saratoga, penned in an underground diary, "The Americans were having a Christmas while we were attacking them. All the sailors got gifts from home organizations. Cigarettes, candy, books, razors, paper, and lights decorated the mess hall. They sang songs and played music. They were joyful. We were starving and dying for the emperor, while our enemies were celebrating with plenty. This is when I knew Japan had already lost." The news went beyond a diet to a basic worldview. The Yamato spirit, Japan's faith that spiritual power would top material weakness, collapsed in the face of American industrial reality. Ensign Teo Yamamoto, who was captured at Okinawa, went on to write, "We were taught Americans were soft, that their surplus made them weak. But I saw them fight fires for 12 hours, then have ice cream, and go back into battle. The surplus did not weaken them, it nourished them. We were the weak ones. Faking spirit can substitute for food." By the end of the war, Japanese POWs had seen impossibilities. Carriers turning salt water into fresh water, ice cream in the tropics, movies on the ocean, libraries in the combat areas, hospitals on the water, machine shops in battle. They had eaten foods most Japanese never dreamed of. Hamburgers, hot dogs, milkshakes, apple pie, chocolate cake. They had seen democracy's excess. Enlisted men enjoying officers' chow, all races eating together. Enemies receiving medical attention. The repatriation of Japanese prisoners following surrender dispersed these secrets across Japan. Ex-POWs served unwittingly as American abundance ambassadors. Their accounts were stronger than any propaganda of occupation. They described ships on which sailors grumbled about meals that would be feasts for Japanese, where ice cream was standard, where enlisted men lived in greater luxury than Japanese nobles. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, Pearl Harbor architect who had been witness to American excess, became a Christian and a missionary. His metamorphosis from architect of surprise attack to Preacher of Forgiveness was triggered by that one cup of coffee on USS Missouri. The Americans had all the reasons to despise me, to kill me. They gave me medical treatment, food, and respect instead. This excess of spirit had been stronger than any weapon. Statistical overview from U.S. naval documents. Caloric intake per day, U.S. Navy 4,100 calories, IJN 1,400 calories. Freshwater production in big U.S. carriers, 140,000 gallons per day. Ice cream production on U.S. Lexington, 500 gallons per day. Bread production on USS Enterprise, 15,000 loaves per day. Mail delivery, weekly, even in combat. Movie shows 2 to 3 various films per week. Laundry twice weekly, clean uniforms. Medical supplies, full surgical capacity at sea. The Japanese captives who witnessed American carrier plenty came back to a devastated country with a revolutionary message. The enemy's power lay not in cruelty, but kindness, not in need, but plenty, not in spirit, but logistics. Their accounts prepared Japan for occupation and rebirth. They had seen the future, and it tasted like chocolate ice cream eaten at sea in the midst of war. The conversion of Japanese soldiers through contact with American naval excess is history's most thoroughgoing ideological about-face. Soldiers who were ready to die for the emperor lived to relate about American ice cream machines. The suicide pilots who were rescued got to see democracy's mundane abundance. Sailors prepared for spiritual combat found material excess upheld and did not debilitate combat spirit. Ultimately, the ice cream machines on U.S. carriers did what bombs did not. Total annihilation of Japanese militarist myth. The soft-serve machines running while ships burned. The freshly baked bread made in battles, medical treatment provided to enemies. These disclosures rewrote Japanese perception of American might and their own defeat. They came back to Japan not as vanquished soldiers, but as testimony to richness beyond dreams, bearing lessons that would transform their country from militarist empire to democratic partner. The tale reminds us that sometimes victories are achieved not by demolishing but demonstrating, that plenty is stronger than weapons, that the manner in which a country sustains its foes shows its real strength. The Japanese, who could not accept American carriers, had ice cream machines, discovered that the most potent weapon of democracy was the power to generate abundance, even in war, to give abundance even to enemies, to stay human even in the ferocity of war.